Being chosen is a big part of my life. I began my life being adopted by my parents. At the age of 10, I found out I was adopted in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, at a mother daughter retreat. And that's important for later in my story. But my life was pretty typical. I loved cheerleading and I loved going to plays, being in plays. I was a big nerd. I loved to study. I loved reading books. So it was pretty typical. At the start of my freshman year, I hit my first setback. I was raped by my boyfriend and it shattered everything inside of me. I had anxieties and PTSD and mistrust of men. It blanketed my life and I hid it all inside. I told no one it had happened. I felt ashamed and lost and alone. But I hid it with a smile and I kept trucking on. And I was blessed by meeting my husband. And I brought my brokenness, he brought his, and we were married on March 10th, 2007. And what had begun in our dating relationship carried on into our marriage. I was full of bringing my past to my present, so I kept mistrusting him, and it was just rough. Our marriage was really hard, and we were struggling with both our pasts, and it just kept conflict. And one day, an amazing woman invited me to a women's retreat. By this time, I was a new mom. I had a 5-month-old and a 3-year-old, and the thought of getting away for a full night's sleep sounded amazing. But I was truly nervous. I didn't want to be around all these women. I didn't know what they'd think about me. My insecurities were on the rise. But I went. And I heard these women talk about Jesus in a way that I'd never heard before. When they talked about Jesus, it wasn't in Bible stories or verses. They talked about Jesus in their rough spots. In the middle of their mess, there was Jesus. And they had a fire in their hearts when they talked about Jesus. And my doubts just loomed even more. And I remember they gave us a word. And they asked us to go out and have a quiet time. And I went out to this dry spot in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. And I remember saying, Jesus, I accept this word no matter what it is. And I turned it over. And it was wanted. A word that my heart longed for. And I argued with Jesus over it. Because all I kept hearing was, I want you. I want all of you. And I argued, Jesus, you've had me my entire life. And I kept that all bottled in, that struggle and the mess, and until around midnight that night when I gathered with those amazing women and I let my heart go for the first time ever. I told someone I was hurting, and I told someone about the pain. And more importantly, that night, I ran to Jesus with all my heart. I gave him my life. And instead of asking him to fix everything that I had done before, like a band-aid, I just wanted him. I wanted the healer. And he became my healer, my savior, my leader of my life on May 6, 2011. And that night, I became whole and forgiven and brand new. And life was never the same after that. I had my comeback that night. Years later, my husband and I began struggling again in our marriage. We were miscommunicating, arguments kept arising. I kept not putting my whole heart into our marriage, and I kept relying on other people instead of letting Daniel lead the family, and it was just imploding. And this time, I knew Jesus and Daniel knew Jesus, and we brought our issues into the light of community, and they helped us get to Jesus with our marriage. And I experienced another comeback, one that I'm continuing to experience, of learning to fight together instead of against each other. And after 9 years of listening to Jesus and learning his voice, in the middle of this current setback where I'm frustrated and stressed at times with the kids, and I see their struggles with insecurities, things that I have fought, I know there's a comeback because I've been there. And I believe my kids are going to experience a comeback of their own. And I pray for that day. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know it's coming because I've experienced one myself again and again and again. And I'm just so grateful for May 6, 2011, my first comeback that I'm celebrating today. Because that first comeback continues to set me up for the ones to come. Thanks, Jesus, for being my healer and for calling me wanted.